So yeah, were you waiting with bated breath going, I don't know what it's going to look like?
And because there was quite a lot of footage.
Yeah, for 2 hours, down to what, 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
I think it was about 10, 11 minutes or something like that.
So insane brand awareness for your business.
Oh, it was unbelievable brand awareness for us. I'm not sure, actually, that we would have survived without it.
Hello and welcome to the investment season of How to Start Up, a podcast for anyone starting or scaling a company. Hosted by me, Juliet Fallowfield, founder of B Corp certified PR communications and podcast consultancy Fallowfield & Mason.
With over 225 episodes of Dragon's Den recorded so far, thousands of entrepreneurs have pitched their business ideas to leading investors via the show. However, it can offer more than just investment. In this episode, I hear from Déj Doherty, founder of the Wholeleaf Company, the sustainable palm leaf tableware brand. Déj co-founded his company to reduce the amount of plastic tableware going to landfill, while also creating employment opportunities in developing countries. Appearing on Dragon's Den was a pivotal moment for the business, which has since gone on to supply leading organisations including Waitrose, Glastonbury Festival and Buckingham Palace, to name but a few. Déj shares his experiences of Dragon's Den, how he leveraged that appearance on the show, and a surprising outcome of what happened with the investment he may or may not have secured. Thank you, Déj, for your time today on How to Start Up. Before we get into Dragon's Den and everything that you experienced through that process, it would be great if you could introduce who you are and a little bit about the business that you founded.
My name's Déj. I founded a company called the Wholeleaf Company. We make sustainable tableware and takeaway packaging out of waste palm leaves. We supply to the hospitality industry. And our mission is to create an employment revolution in India and get lots of people in rural areas into decent paid, safe employment.
When did you start your business?
So the brand, I guess, if I could call it that, started quite a long time ago in 2008. So it was a side hustle, sort of kitchen table business for quite a long time. I did that alongside a number of other things. And I'd say probably about 6 or 7 years into the business, I started to see a bit of a change in the zeitgeist in terms of sustainability. And I realized that this is probably the time to start taking it a lot more seriously and go out and raise money and do all that kind of fun stuff. Having said that, when I started in the early days, I did think, let's go and raise some money, but there wasn't really that sort of ecosystem around. 2008, you didn't have this ecosystem of VCs, angels, and probably had some bigger private equity guys, but what we now know is that the fundraising path that a lot of startups follow just didn't exist. And the only thing you really had at the time was Dragon's Den, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah. So is that what, when you started going maybe full time on the startup, you thought, right, we need investment, that's the place to go and get it? Was that the reason you went towards it?
Yeah, it was the only kind of route. So when I started Wholeleaf in early 2008, the global financial crisis very quickly kicked in. So as opposed to when I'd been thinking about it and thinking, oh, it's fine, we'll just go to the bank and get a loan or an overdraft or whatever it might be, some bank funding to get us on our way. I put in all my pittance of a life savings at the time. And then the financial crisis kicked in 2008, and then there was just no cash anywhere. So banks just weren't lending, particularly to new and pretty exotic businesses. So genuinely the only sort of seemingly realistic way of getting any kind of funding at that time was Dragon's Den. And that's how I ended up applying to it and going on it. It was actually as a way of generally trying to raise some capital rather than raise awareness or publicity.
And so from when you first thought about it to applying, was it quite an arduous process to get an application in? When you first thought about it to applying, was it quite an arduous process to get an application in?
It actually wasn't. It was bizarrely straightforward. It was a pretty straightforward online application. I think there was an acknowledgement email. And then about 3 or 4 months later, I got called in for what was essentially a screen test. It was pitching to a producer at what is now White City House. There was then the BBC TV studios. And then a couple of months after that, it was, yeah, we like it. It was, I think actually after the sort of the screen test, as it were, there was a couple of months of toing and froing and fine tuning our pitch and that sort of stuff. And then a couple of months after that, it was, okay, we're going to put you on, and you're on in It was something like 8 or 9 weeks or like that.
And were you nervous about going on TV? Had you done some media training or had you put yourself out there before?
I hadn't really put myself out there in that way before. Was I nervous? I probably was, but I don't remember being nervous.
Yeah.
And also the way it all happens, it's almost like you don't really have time to be nervous. And I think the more you prepare, the less nervous you feel. And I knew the idea and what we were doing well. And frankly, numbers wise, there weren't a lot.
Yeah.
There wasn't that much to remember. So that part was actually pretty straightforward. And it was a weird experience because I watched Dragon's Den a lot. I probably don't so much these days, but at that time, certainly I was watching it, avidly. And so I think just actually being there on set was quite a strange experience. And also realizing that it was a set, because this is back in the time when Dragon's Den purported to be in this sort of disused warehouse on some industrial estate, which is all rubbish. It was just literally a set at Elstree of Bournemouth Studios.
Yeah, it's a studio.
It's a studio, yeah. But it was quite a bizarre experience because they make you get there, and certainly we did anyway. We had to get there at something like 6 a.m. or something like that.
And join the queue of all the other people going for it.
Yeah, and it's not they just shove you all in a room and kind of feed you sugary snacks. And there's me thinking, oh, it's great, I'm going to turn out there's going to be some sort of nice warm sandwich and tea and coffee. There's none of that. It's like
you're in a holding pen.
Basically, yeah, with not quite enough seats for everyone. And so some people have to stand, etc. So yeah, it's certainly an interesting experience.
And were you so determined because you needed this investment for your business to grow? Was it a kind of make or break? If you didn't raise, it wouldn't happen?
In hindsight, perhaps there should have been, but I don't think I ever feel like that. I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably feel the same way, where you don't think anything is terminal until it really is. And I think it's a weird thing you have to do as an entrepreneur is hold two opposing ideas in your head at the same time, which is that, okay, maybe it could be terminal, but it's not going to be terminal. And I think you'll go through your journey always having to have this two opposing ideas of knowing that something could end your business, but at the same time thinking that nothing's going to ever end your business.
It's that blind faith and that confidence. A few guests have talked about that. If you are not so resolute and so committed to that idea, in those dark days, you'll give up. And actually, if Dragon's Den doesn't work out, I'll find another way. It'll work out. Because also something when you start a business that you don't realize is that you get knocked the entire time and then you just get used to it. Whereas when you're employed by someone else and you've just got a regular job description, things are a lot more dramatic in a weird way because you don't get so many knocks. So when you do, it's a big deal. Whereas I think when you run a company, you never know when the next iceberg's coming your way. But for you going in there, so you're like, give it my best shot, see what happens. And what were you asking for in terms of investment from the Dragons?
We were asking for £120,000 for 20% of the business at the time. And effectively, there was no business. Like, I think our sales had been, £5,000 or something for the year before. It was really just, I'd say startup, but it was barely even that. It was an idea with me. It was completely clueless at the helm, but I thought it was a good idea. But one thing we did have, luckily or weirdly, was that I'd approached Sainsbury's, and Sainsbury's had agreed to put our products in 500 of their stores, as had Oxfam agreed to put our products into 300 stores. And we didn't really have anything. And we went to the bank and said, look, we're in 800 stores and we literally just set up shop. And our bank manager at the time said, you're over trading. You don't have the money. You can't do it. And I'm not giving you any money.
To fulfill. So you had the orders, but you didn't have the stock to fulfill the order. So you needed the investment, the cash flow to produce the product to fulfill the order.
Yeah. So we needed cash for a number of things. We needed cash to fulfill the order. We actually ended up being able to fulfill it. But ideally, once you get into grocery stores, so you've got sell in to grocery stores, which is getting hold of the buyer and getting your products on shelves. And I think most people think that's job done. But actually, the difficult job is getting people to go in stores and buy your product and actually getting people to understand that it's there on shelves. Because I think there's a sort of idea in retail grocery that, if your product's good enough, it'll sell itself. That's just not true. Ironically, having said that, our product did quite well without any marketing budget at all.
That's definitely not the regular way it goes. That's a nice surprise.
It was a nice surprise, yeah, and it did a lot better than expected it to do. But
So you could walk into the den saying, we've got these orders, they're signed and sealed, we're just about to fulfill them. You're at that tipping point.
We were at that tipping point, and I thought, and going back to your question earlier of how I felt about not getting the money, at no point did I think we weren't going to get the money. It said to me, that's not going to happen, because that was what was going to happen. It didn't happen.
Oh, what did happen?
I went on to the den and they basically gave me a lot of reasons why they thought it wouldn't work, which was, so everyone gave me slightly different reasons. So this was quite a classic panel of Issa Jones, Duncan Bannatyne, Deborah Meaden, Theo Paphitis, and James Caan. That was that time.
Yeah.
And they all had different reasons for why they thought it was amazing. It just wasn't going to work at that point in time. Mostly around the fact that there was a financial crisis. And here we are with a product, whilst being amazing and sustainable and ethical and all those good things and looking fantastic, just was too expensive for the market in what was a price sensitive time. Now it seems logical, but actually it turned out that was not correct, but that kind of put paid to our pitch. But they all seemed to love it. And actually one of the most interesting things that happened in that process was that, unbeknownst to me, once I actually walked out with them, they all turned around to each other and said, this is amazing. So I found that quite bizarre. But so amazing, you should have given me the cash.
Yeah, so none of them offered?
No, James Caan came the close, which is annoying because he basically said, if you'd asked for a little bit less money, I would have been in. And actually, when we first put it to the BBC, we were after £80,000, and they effectively said, make it a bit more interesting and ask for a bit more money.
Oh.
So we ended up asking for 50% more, and that actually was probably a little bit too much for a business that effectively had no sales and lots of potential and contract with Sainsbury's, etc. But we hadn't sold anything through Sainsbury's yet. That was coming online 2 months after I went on Dragon's Den. So we didn't really have anything to stand on.
So did you walk out there a bit deflated and a bit disheartened?
I walked out probably quite high on adrenaline.
Yeah.
And I was actually in front of the Dragons for 2 hours almost, I think it was. And which was shocking to me because I had my co-founder at the time, Peter, he was downstairs. So usually with Dragon's Den, I don't know if this has changed, but if there are two of you, they prefer one person to go on unless you absolutely need two people. So I was upstairs in front of them and he was downstairs, and I came downstairs. Doing for the last 2 hours? Like, 2 hours? What? He said, yeah, you've been up there for like almost 2 hours, and it felt like 10 minutes.
And were they grilling you about the business, getting to know the business? They were obviously intrigued and interested, but just not quite enough to offer.
Yeah, I think they were very intrigued, certainly by the product. So they'd never seen anything really like it. And I think it is an incredible product. It's completely natural. It's made from waste that would otherwise be burned. We don't use any chemicals. It's made in a very simple, low energy process. It's home compostable. You can put it in the oven.
You were solving a lot of problems back in 2008. That's fairly revolutionary. Now people almost take it for granted that there should be a sustainable message in a product somewhere.
Yeah.
With the rise of B Corp, I think there's now 1,500 B Corps in the UK. It's all going the right direction. But back then, you were coming with a proposition that they probably hadn't seen too often. But for you, in terms of putting yourself in that position, was there anything that you would have wanted to have done differently in hindsight?
I think definitely I made some mistakes. I think one of them really was not being more adamant that the numbers that we were talking about in terms of the actual products and what the kind of volumes that we could reach, not being more adamant. That was not just a possibility, but just drop in the ocean for the market. So that was probably a function of not really having strong enough grasp on the market size, even though I'd done all the market research, etc. I think with hindsight, I don't think I was vociferous enough about the fact that what I was claiming we could do was really quite conservative. In fact, to them, it seemed outrageous, but with hindsight, it was pretty conservative.
And from filming to it coming out, what was the time between the two?
It was about 3 months.
So quite quick. And then when it came out, did they tell you that you were going to make the cut, and did they forewarn you were about to be on national TV?
They do. They give you about 2 weeks warning. That's probably actually the most nerve-wracking time because, you know, people on Dragon's Den crumble and some do exceptionally well, and some people are either made to look silly or come across as being quite silly. And then you realize once you're there that, first of all, it's a very high pressure environment, because as opposed to what you see on TV of being quite an organized sort of pitched and answer Q&A session, it's not. And again, I don't know if that's changed, but it's a kind of a free for all. You have 5 dragons often asking you questions at exactly the same time and often wanting answers first.
Yeah, it's like a firing squad.
So it feels a bit like that. And
so hopefully any founder knows their business better than anyone else. And if they don't, there's a problem. But you have to be completely confident in your answers and succinct. A lot of people talk about investment saying the investors need to have, yes, the business plan, yes, the numbers, but they need to have faith in the founder and they need to be convinced by the founder's passion. That's what tips them over the edge of, okay, the business is solid, but I believe in this person. So for you standing there having all these questions fired at you, was it a bit bamboozling?
I remember it being relatively difficult to manage, because it's just the case that when you have 5 people all talking to you all at once, that's quite difficult to manage regardless of who they are. But I did have a lot of passion for the project. In fact, all I had was passion for the project, and just having this very strong feeling that the world was going to change and sustainability was going to be completely normal, and that this was, without a shadow of a doubt, going to be part of our futures. And I was 100% sure of that.
I mean, you were right.
Yeah. Incidentally, yeah, luckily. But I suppose it's one of those things where it seemed too good to be true, but it actually wasn't. And the product generally is as good as that. And it was one of those situations where I thought, well, I can't see myself doing anything else now.
Fast forward to today, we're 2024, just in January, and you're in Waitrose, Festival, Buckingham Palace. Like, you've clearly gone on and built this business to be a success, and your clients are thrilled to be able to use you as a supplier. But for the episode around investment, businesses need cash to survive. And something I've learned through B Corp is that you have to be a profitable business to become a B Corp. Before you can protect people and planet, you have to be profitable. And it's great to have the best will in the world, but if you don't have a business, you can't really affect change. So when it came out and you had that 2-week lead time, did you put like a marketing and PR campaign around it of like, how do you leverage this? Or did you just sit back and wait for it to come out?
No, we did actually put a marketing PR campaign around it. There wasn't much by way of social media at the time. So Instagram didn't exist.
Take me back to those days.
Exactly. It was very early days. Yeah. So we put as much PR marketing around it as we could. Just really create a media presence on the internet. Again, just didn't really exist. So at the time, traditional TV like BBC was really it. And then social media was in its very early days. So certainly did as much as we could. It was quite a nerve-wracking time because you don't know how you're going to come across on TV.
And you don't know how they're going to edit it as well. I think this is something that people don't realise. The same as we talked about with podcasting, once you're on it, it's in the hands of the editors and they could actually skew it any way they like. You've given over that right to control that message. So yeah, were you waiting with bated breath going, I don't know what it's going to look like?
And because there was quite a lot of footage.
Yeah, for 2 hours. 2 hours down to what, 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
I think it was about 10, 11 minutes. Or something like that.
So insane brand awareness for your business.
Oh, it was unbelievable brand awareness for us. I'm not sure actually that we would have survived without it.
You went in purely with, I need to raise some money, but the brand awareness would be nice. And came out of it going, hang on, the brand awareness has actually meant so much more to the business long term.
Dragon's Den has always been a very popular show. And I think what I found quite specific to the UK in doing business is that provenance is very important. So as opposed to the US where everyone loves new products and everyone's ready to try something they've never heard of before. And for companies 5 days old or 50 years old, no one really cares. Whereas in the UK, there's a cachet of being an old company that's been around for a long time. You get your royal warrants and you've got Fortnum & Mason since 1868 or whatever it might be. So I think there's this sort of culture of the older your business, the longer it's been around, the more we can trust it. There's probably some truth in that. And then the converse of that is the newer your business, the less we trust it. And I think being on Dragon's Den gave us a little bit of a shortcut to trust. And I think people look at a business that they've seen and there's things in their head that goes, I've seen this somewhere before. And it just gives them that little bit more trust than they would have if they'd never seen or heard of you. And I think that was the part that really saw us through the early years, not just selling to consumers, but also selling to businesses as well.
It's the purest editorial you can get because you haven't bought your spot to be on there. It's earned media. And we talk about that in our day job with print column inches, digital newspapers, social media content. You can earn media in lots of different forms, but being on TV to that weight of an audience is unfortunately still being on the Daily Mail. The reach is so phenomenal and people will, build that familiarity. But a lot of people don't understand that paid and earned are different. Paid, you pay to be someone and get that brand awareness, whereas earned, because you earn it. And it's that dragon's opinion that you're worthy on being on that show. It gives that weight to it that someone else is saying that you're really good and that you deserve to be there. But also the familiarity, people need to see things between 5 and 8 times to build up that conscious thought of, hang on, that's familiar, that's familiar, that's familiar. Okay, they've got that integrity. So for you, was it an absolute game changer when it broadcast? Did you see a lift in website traffic straight away? What was the aftershock?
So we definitely saw a lift in web traffic. Our phone did ring. We definitely had people curious about what we were up to, potential investors. But again, going back to what I said earlier about there not really being that ecosystem. These weren't traditional VCs or even angels as we now know them. These were sort of people in related industries that maybe had a bit of cash and that were just quite keen to understand where we were. And I think the thing that struck most people was just how small we and the fact that, because obviously the first natural question is, so what have your sales been or what's traction been like? And when you say to someone who's a potential investor, I've done £6,000 in sales. I thought from seeing you on Dragon's Den, it'd been a lot more than that, but it really at that point in time, it hadn't, because we were just barely sputtering along.
Someone said to me very early on in season 1, is like, as long as you can get someone to pay something for your product or your service, it has weight, it has value, you've proven. And it doesn't matter how much or who, you've just got to get someone to pay you something. And it was really reassuring of like, I'll work out my pricing as I go. But as long as someone sees value in transacting on it, it's proven. And then from there, you have got the confidence and you obviously will build. But for you bursting their bubble, like you've been on Dragon's Den, like you must be huge. And they're like, we're still tiny, we're still starting.
Yeah.
But for them, that must have been quite exciting because it's a new opportunity and they can get in early.
I think these days, I think if we were a 2-year-old company, I think the approach from investors and our approach probably be a little bit different. But going back all that time, I don't think these were necessarily savvy investors per se. These are mostly sort of industry people with businesses, a bit of cash, and were quite interested in seeing if they could get involved in some way, shape or form. So I think their approach to business and what we were doing was quite traditional in that we want to see turnover, profit and that sort of thing, as opposed to what is a little bit more of a modern way of looking at some businesses, particularly in our sector. Okay, you've got turnover, but what are you trying to do here? You're growing a brand, or are you just a B2C play? But we were actually D2C and B2B, and we were building a brand. So our value wasn't purely just in the sales and profits, really. We had some brand equity.
So did you land investment from someone inquiring after you'd been on Dragon's Den, or did you find it somewhere completely different?
No, we never got any investment from anyone, even after Dragon's Den. There were people that we spoke to for a little while.
So you grew it organically?
Completely bootstrapped it. There's no investment at all. And I think that's happening now, particularly with the last months having been so brutal for startups and not being able to raise money. Getting that revenue and getting sales is key. And it became very quickly apparent that we needed to just go and get sales. And it's both further proves that the business was viable, but also to survive, frankly. Even though I had co-founders, they very quickly dropped out because they just wanted to go and do more straightforward stuff with their life, have proper jobs and just
have an easier life.
Stable. So I was a one-man band for a long time.
Less mouths to feed, less stakeholders, quicker decision-making. We often have this debate in our co-working office of like sole founder or co-founder. And when it's a co-founder that works, it's amazing. You've got double the capacity, but I've only ever done it on my own. So I just make a decision and crack on with it. I don't have to run it past anybody else. And I find for my way of working, I much prefer that. However, it can be really lonely. So it's you looking back would you have it any other way?
I'd say the only piece of advice I ever give to any budding entrepreneurs, don't do it on your own.
Oh, really?
Having done it and having seen other businesses that have had co-founders. And I think it depends on the type of business to an extent. But I think certainly our type of business where we've got operations and we're shipping,
you've got product
and we've got product and we've got a plethora of customers and we're in a number of different verticals and there's a lot of moving parts. It would have been really helpful to have one or two other people at my level in terms of making strategic decisions and just being able to bounce ideas off, and also just having hands on deck, being able to actually get stuff done.
Having the time and the bandwidth for sure. Yeah. Have you since gone after investment since then?
Yeah. So we actually then set about seriously raising, and going back to your question of investment, part of the reason I didn't is because being a one-man band, as you touched on earlier, is raising money is a full-time job. So if you're a one-man band and you're
trying to do all things,
trying to sell to Sainsbury's and selling online and also selling to caterers, etc., just doing sales all day, and then you add trying to raise money, you're going to drop a ball somewhere. Either you lose customers or you're just not very good at raising the money. And actually what happened for a long time is I just I didn't have the bandwidth to go about raising money.
So you grew a bit slower than you might have done.
Yeah. So we grew, for many reasons, grew very slow. We actually had a point where we grew very quickly, and then the business kind of plateaued for a few years just because we needed more cash, but I couldn't actually spare the time really to go out and really hunt it down. And I think it got to a stage where I just had to go and raise money, and I raised a little bit of cash and definitely dropped some balls, I think, in terms of just running the business, because it really was just all consuming raising money. But that was a game changer for us because it allowed me then to go and grow the business a little bit more, but also hire. And that became the key to being able to go and raise a little bit more money. And having said that, we actually haven't historically raised that much. We're raising this year. So we've got our first really substantial raise, but we've only ever raised tiny chunks of cash in tiny pockets over the years.
But presumably, if you can then still grow the business in the way that you want, you're giving away less of it. So I've grown quite slowly, or what I think is slowly. But everyone's like, but you own 100% of the company and you answer to no one. I was like, yeah, but what else could I have done another way? And that's where I think a lot of people have to sit down and think long and hard about what does success look like to me in this job that I've made up for myself.
Yeah.
And I don't really have the answer to myself on that. As long as I'm happy and I'm learning, I'm fine for now and it'll come. But someone's like, you're going to grow it and sell it. You're going to do this. And do that. I was like, I'm just paying my mortgage. Like, what? I just started off the back of redundancy. So a lot of people, I think, if they're debating stepping away from a salaried role and doing their own thing, I think it's a big, other than money, why are you doing this? Because you're never going to work as hard as in a startup. And for you, what does success look like to you in your company?
Question. Success looks like, from a personal point of view, freedom, and having the freedom to not necessarily have to spend a lot of my time almost just firefighting and actually being able to innovate. Because I think that's what I personally find interesting and exciting, is what new stuff can we do with our material, with our products, or that's related, that's cool, that's new, that's no one's ever seen before. And that takes a process, creative thinking and actually watching something come to life. I find that really exciting and interesting. And I'd love to be able to do more of that. So personal success to me looks not necessarily having to go and fundraise all the time and
do the bit of the job you love. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. For the business, I think certainly within the UK, and I hope further afield, is becoming the brand Wholeleaf, which is our trademark, to become something like a household name, which is where we want to go. So actually, we're not in Waitrose and we're not in any grocery stores. We actually pulled out of grocery stores because, again, just didn't have the bandwidth to deal with them. Payment terms are not great. You need to have a lot of backup inventory in case sales do all of a sudden take off. And ideally, when you're in grocery stores, you want to have a budget to be able to market your product and do activation, be able to give out samples and all that kind of stuff, so that your stuff is actually selling through supermarkets. So that's one of the things that we're going to go and do after we've raised money. But we mostly supply businesses who either pay up front or pay on delivery, and their volumes are good, and that's much easier to deal with.
Best of luck with it all. Something that we do with guests is that we have a question from a previous guest for the next guest, and then we'd ask you a question for the one after you.
Okay.
Actually, the predecessor to you on our series investment was Rohan, who founded Quarter.
Okay.
And his question was, what gets you up in the morning and what stops you sleeping at night? Because something that I've definitely noticed is people are like, you need to protect your health first and foremost. If you put your air mask on before anyone else's, and if you don't do that, your business will crumple. And I have been guilty of burning candle at both ends. Someone says, you're luck, Anna, now, how does that work? I'm like, it doesn't. So for you, what gets you up in the morning? What motivates you? And what keeps you awake at night?
So there are two things that get me up in the morning. It depends what stage we're in. When things are going really well and there's something really interesting to do, I'm up and I'm ready to go. And if we're designing new products and I've got to go meet the designer and kind of discuss something that's completely new, it's fresh, that I find exciting. The other thing that gets me up in the morning is paying bills and paying wages, right? So we're quite a seasonal business. We're busy in the summer and then we're not so busy in the winter. So winter, our cash flow dips quite a lot and then we make it all back in the summer. Can be quite tricky to manage, but frankly, just which I actually realize now is the thing that I would say that I'm actually genuinely proud of, not even the most proud of, is probably the thing I'm really actually proud of, is just employing people. I think it's like a massive privilege to be able to hopefully impact on someone's life and to be able to convince right-minded and right-thinking people to join you on this weird journey of whatever it is that you're doing and feel like this is what I want to do rather than going and getting a job at some massive firm that probably will pay me more. So I think that's the biggest privilege, certainly, of having my own business. But yeah, those are the two things that get me up in the morning. Yeah.
Probably they could also be the things that stop you sleeping at night.
Exactly. Yeah. Certainly.
That responsibility.
Yeah, responsibility. And that's another thing about fundraising that I think you have this idea of the responsibility you might have when you get investment. Until that money actually hits your account, do you think, oh, now I've now got someone else's cash in my account and I'm responsible for it and they've entrusted me with their hard-earned money. And all of a sudden, there's a weight of responsibility on your shoulders of, right, I can't screw this up.
Yeah.
Which is quite different to when you're a one-man band and you own 100% of it, because you think, worst case scenario, everything goes upside down and I'm the only person that suffers for it, hopefully.
What would your question be for the next guest?
My question would be, if you were being paid £1 million a year just to get out of bed and do something for 6 hours a day, would it be what you're doing now? And if not, what would it be?
That is such a good question. Because someone said to me, if I came to you with a check of this much, what would you do with it? I'm like, I genuinely don't know, because I've never had investment. So I've never allowed myself to think about it.
Yeah.
And it's a month later, I'm still thinking about it. What would I spend that on? Because I find people actually is the hardest part. And I would love to invest in more people, but they are so goddamn hard to find. The right people who get our values, get our culture, get our ways of working, get why we're doing things differently, and then can do it as well. If I had a magic wand, I think I'd avatar the existing team and times them by 10 because they're wonderful. But that's not a thing yet. Who knows? There might be someone working on it in a startup somewhere.
You never know. You never know.
Thank you, Déj, so much for your time and your advice and insight. It's been fascinating talking to you, and best of luck with everything Wholeleaf.
Thanks very much.
If you'd like to contact Déj, you can find all of his details in the show notes, along with a recap of the advice he has so kindly shared. Thank you for listening to How to Start Up. I hope these conversations offer you some confidence, encouragement, and reassurance that you're on the right track. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I'd be so appreciative if you were to rate, review, and subscribe, as it will really help other people starting a company discover it. Of course, if you've got any questions at all on PR communications or podcasting, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me, because at Fallowfield & Mason, we love supporting startups.